class where you're actually studying because you're 16 and you're not just going to go do nothing. And I went to a class for a year and was miserable in the class and basically felt like I was not doing anything and quit the class. And I think a week later I had 3 auditions, and they were my first 3 auditions. They were all on the same day, and the first one I auditioned for was a TV show called Boy Meets World, and that was my first job. I was 17.
So maybe we do hear more crazy starting stories than I expected. Like, really great. Okay, I have a list that was supposed to be printed, and I think they're still kind of working on that. So hopefully, I'll just kind of get started. Okay, so if you guys are actors, the actors in here who want to be actors, I feel like they're kind of first steps before even like the audition process that you have to go through. And the main question I always get is, okay, yeah, I know you have to audition, but like, what do you have to, like, how do you get auditions? I mean, we have to get an agent. They're like, well, how do you get an agent? I'm just like, oh yeah, you're right. Like there's a lot involved there. So my first thing is, if you want to be an actor, I feel like it kind of takes money to make money. You have to invest in a little bit, because you have to go get headshots, which can be really expensive. And then there are all these, there's some places that are acting classes, but I'm seeing these schools around town they're like modeling schools or teach you the audition process schools. I feel like if they're charging you for that, it's a ripoff. Like, I don't know, there's a school, somebody was telling me the other day, I don't remember who it was, but it's $60,000 a year. And they did it for 2 years, because it's a 2-year program. And they said that they wasted, but it's not acting, it was like to teach you how to get an agent, all this stuff. It was like $60,000 a year. And they said at the end of the class, they didn't feel like they learned anything. Now, I don't know if that'll happen here, because I've never done this before, but I can't believe that they were able to charge that much money. So I feel like there are a lot of programs out there, unless it's legit, like the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. I think there are some schools that still give money, and you need to be very careful of those. The modeling schools, I don't know if you want to be a model, but have you seen those schools around town? Yeah, I just don't understand them. So I feel like there's nothing better than on-hand experience. So I think the first step, if you want to become an actor, headshots are really important if you want to find an agent. So be prepared with headshots. If you pick pieces from the movies that you like or plays that you like, that could be what you're interested in, or kind of the range that you have. So I feel like if you have those steps, then you can probably, hopefully, get an agent. As far as managers, I have a manager. I didn't have one for the longest time growing up. I don't really know. I feel like unless you're Tom Cruise, you don't need a manager. I feel like, but I don't know if you have one.
I have a manager. I think they play different roles. The agent's job is to try and procure you acting work, and that is their only job. And the manager is kind of like more on the strategic end of it, like, you know, we got to get you a meeting with this studio executive because they're going to make this movie next year, which is blah, blah, blah. My agent would never do that. That would be my manager. And, you know, and it goes into other stuff like, you know, you have to put this on Twitter because this will wind up affecting something in 3 months. So
it's kind of amazing how that has turned into what it has now.
Yeah.
I mean, little things like they do ask you, okay, well, will you put this picture up from the last production that we did, because that way it'll build more excitement for that film. Or so it's publicity is very key in all of this. So even getting a job. And okay, so we'll go to the next thing. Does everybody know what a casting director does? pretty much. Well, I'm going to go over it again just in case. A casting director is somebody hired for the film, TV show, whatever it is, to find the right people to fit the roles that the producers are looking for. So instead of the producers having to go through all the same people that the casting director goes through, they're able to narrow it down a little bit and then bring the ones that they think the producers or the director will like, so they don't have to sit there through 400 auditions, which they kind of still do anyway. But yeah, it's a long process. There are all different types of auditions. There are movie auditions, commercials, theater, TV, everything. And I have a good friend, Austin Butler, who I worked with on a TV show called Ruby and the Rockets. And it kind of, like, I was really surprised. I'd never really heard anybody kind of start acting the way he did, but I guess it's very common, but it was the first story that I had heard and kind of knew somebody who did this. He was an extra for like 5 years on different sets, all like a lot of different Nickelodeon shows, a lot of different Disney shows. He's just this cute little blonde kid, and they got used to seeing him on set all the time because they're always school scenes, so he was always around. And the main cast got to know him really well, finally to the point where when there were roles, they would suggest him for them. And finally, he was able to actually have a guest starring role. I think it was on the Shamie Lynn Spears show. I don't remember. Zoe 101 or something like that. So he started off as an extra. So I always feel like, don't be afraid to start small, because there's nothing like an on-hand experience. Understanding how a set works, understanding certain lingo on set. Like, do you guys know what 10-100 means? It's like the code word for our actor has to go to the bathroom. So instead of saying like, Lexa has to pee right now, they'll be like, oh, 10-100. So everybody knows what's going on without having to kind of be rude about it. So don't be afraid to start small, because I feel like I just worked with an actor who did a great job, but the stress that he just had to go through. We did a movie in Australia called Broken Hill. It was his first project ever. He had never been on a set before. He just so happened to be amazing in the audition room. He came out of theater school, but he had never been on a film set. So there were so many more nerves there, and because he's the lead, he carried the film. I've never seen a stress ball like him, because he was so nervous all the time, and he gave an excellent performance. But I feel like if you can go on a set and either be an extra, or if you have the opportunity to shadow somebody, or even if you're just there to kind of either be a PA or do a job that's completely different from acting, I feel like if you can get familiar with being on set, that way you can get the on-set jitters gone and just focus on your character, it will help you out so much more. So start small, extra, commercials. Right after the show, I did a lot of different commercials, and it just got me used to not seeing the same people all the time, because I got so used to being on a show and them being like my family that as soon as I was done with it, I didn't understand like why I wasn't going to see them anymore. So when I was doing commercials, and every 2 days you get a new cast and crew because it's just a short little shoot, I kind of learned, oh, okay, so it's kind of you just move on, and maybe 4 years later you'll run into the same people again. And this, even though it's a big industry, it's really tight-knit. You'll find that you'll work with the same crew again, the same cast over and over again, or run into other actors at auditions. So do you find that too? Yeah, it's like a little tight community. There's another, like, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, I was just in South Dakota, because that's where my fiance's from, and we were doing a charity screening there. And some girls came up to me and they're like, we want to be famous actors. And I'm like, okay. They're like, how do we do that? I'm like, well, are you involved with anything here? They're like, no, not yet. We're trying to figure it out. I'm like, well, my number one thing is, I feel like if you want to get into acting, I mean, you can start in any city that you're in. But my biggest thing is, if you want to fully submerge yourself into it, I feel like you have to move to a big city that has a lot of films coming through there. So whether it's LA or New York or Austin, or really if you go online and look at whatever states have the biggest tax deductibles for the movie business, that's where movies will be cast and held. So it might not be the main part where they're auditioning, for the lead guy, like they could probably audition a lead guy in Los Angeles or New York. But for the best friend characters, they usually like to hire local hire. So moved to Toronto. New Mexico has a lot of movies. So
Shreveport,
yeah, Shreveport, Louisiana. Thank you so much. So I feel like, and she looked at me, she was like, but I don't want to leave South Dakota. And I'm like, okay, well then you're gonna have to wait for a movie to come through here in South Dakota to get a job or a commercial or something. And the likelihood of that happening is, I mean, there's really not a lot of stuff coming through there. So I know it's hard, but it's definitely an investment. And you know, you have to be so patient. I haven't done pilot season. Do you guys know what pilot season is? Pilot season, it's just kind of like, they're new shows that are hoping to make it on TV. And I hadn't done pilot season for 6 years. I kind of stuck strictly to movies. And I was very lucky to kind of get offered the role of Ruby in the Rockets. But then after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I miss TV so much after that show ended. I'm like, I think I'm gonna start auditioning for pilots again. And I did it for the first time this past year. I just did pilot season, and it was awful. It was so, I forgot that feeling of that cattle call, every girl trying to get on a TV show. And I've been really fortunate to not have to go through that. But it's amazing how like so many, I feel like, I started acting when I was 4, and I'm 21 now. I feel like I worked so hard for so many years to kind of finally reach a level to where I felt like pretty confident. I feel like I have a lot more to go, but I felt confident with myself. Not cocky, but confident. And it was weird how like you walk into the room, and because there are so many girls for these pilots, they don't care what you've done before. They're just like, okay, we want to see what you can do. And I auditioned, and there was literally 25 different pilots. And out of 25 pilots, I didn't really hear feedback on anything. And I'm so used to hearing feedback on projects, but in pilot season, because there's so many people, they kind of usually don't give you feedback. And I was shocked. And then finally, I was able to test for 2 of the pilots that I auditioned for. But it took that many just to test for 2, and I didn't even get them. But I feel like so many people are like, oh, well, I didn't get the first 5 auditions that I went on, so I'm gonna stop. No, I mean, I've been working for years, and I just auditioned for 25 different pilots in a row, tested for 2, and still didn't get any of them. And that's gonna happen. And you just have to be willing to go, okay, well, that's in the past, and move on and go to your next audition. So it's definitely stressful, it's a struggle. Sometimes it can be so mean in the room. One of the pilots I auditioned for was a CW pilot, and CW, you know, is like a teen kind of network. And I auditioned, and when I was done, one of the guys in the room kind of lets out like a little laugh. He goes, CW, not HBO. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, wow. And I'm like, well, was it to, he goes, well, we're playing more to a teen audience, so thank you. And that was it. Like, there was no more, can I do it again or anything. He was just really rude. So I haven't had to deal with that in a long time, but you're gonna get people like that. So I mean, not all the time. It's a very rare thing, I think, for them to kind of be that blunt and rude to you in a room. But it'll happen, but you can't let it get you down at all. If this is what you want to do, then nothing should be stopping you from doing it, you know? Another thing is, I feel like, hold on, I'm trying to think of where I am. Do you have any audition stories?
Audition stories.
I don't know, are we good, are we bad?
No, I would just not recommend that you try to go do pilot season as your first
time. Yeah, it's brutal.
Into acting or auditioning as a process. It's pretty horrible. Yeah, pilot season is particularly brutal. So a lot of times they will hire people from out of town, but even then it'll be from Chicago or New York or something like that. But if this is something you want to do, and it's not just something you want to do locally with whatever is shooting here or theater, pilot season is something I think you should stay away from at first, because it's not fun.
It's a very stressful process.
Yeah.
I mean, I finally, after a week of doing, I think, 2 auditions a day, and there were just a lot of sides to memorize, and I mean, they used to, I mean, I guess this was because I was younger, but they used to give you 4 pages to memorize. Now with pilots, they're giving you 14 pages, 5 different scenes, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a buttload of stuff, but they want to make sure that you can handle it. So.
And for pilot season, they won't work with you at all. There's no process of, you either walk in and
Art.
somehow are magically the exact thing they pictured, or you surprised them so much that they go, oh my God, I was thinking totally different, and now I'm thinking only about you, and they're seeing thousands of people.
Yeah.
So that is something that could be either like winning the lottery or the biggest discouragement in your life. You know what I mean? And how many of us are really going to win the lottery? So maybe somebody here will. I don't know. But I would say that's not the first thing you should shoot for.
Yeah. Another thing I feel like, aside from pilot season, because they're kind of crazy, I mean, even though pilot season does kind of think this way and have this mentality, it's not as much as I think film or just a regular TV reoccurring role would be, is they're rooting for you. When you go into the room, they're not like, oh, I hope this person isn't it. They want you to be that person so they don't have to keep looking anymore. So instead of going in being nervous, because even during pilot season, as frustrating as it was, I knew that in their minds, they're like, gosh, I hope that she works. I hope that she's the right girl for this role. Because how much would it suck to just have to like sit there over and over again and see the wrong person, you know, for that role? So I feel like they're rooting for you. Go into an audition and just be like, they want me for the role. I'm just gonna do the best I can with what I have, and just know that they want me to be the right person for this role. Have you ever had that attitude?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I think that's right. I think that's a sane and rational attitude to have. It's very hard to overcome your...
It is sometimes. It can be, I mean, especially when like you go in and you're just like, okay, you know, I'm ready, I'm totally ready, I think I have the right look for this role, I'm prepared, I have my lines, and as soon as you walk through the door, you see like 20 other girls that look just like you, and you're like, oh, skirt! Like they're all in skirts, so it's stupid little things like that, but it will get to you, so you gotta just gotta be like, okay, I'm gonna show up, there are gonna be people that look like me, there are gonna be people who don't look like me, but I'm just gonna give it my all and do my best performance, and just keep whatever that you're doing authentic. I feel like if you don't allow yourself that 5 seconds before you start a scene in a room, you'll blow it. And that's kind of what I did on one of these last tests. Was I was first choice for the role. And then when I went into the test, I normally, this is just kind of a routine that I do, before I do a scene, I feel like you're meeting people, you're talking to them, you kind of usually have a conversation with either casting director or producer, and then they want you to go right into it. And you can, but if you don't give yourself like a second to just regroup and then say you're ready, your mind is kind of still where it was with them. So one thing that I usually do, especially on tests, is before I do the scene, I'm just like, just 1 second, and I turn around. And you just kind of get yourself in that mindset of, okay, where am I in this scene? Where was I before the scene started? Where am I now in the scene? And where am I going in the scene? I feel like those are the 3 main things you should always ask yourself when you're reading a script, especially with film. You're going to shoot all over the place. You don't usually film in order to the script. You film all over. So when you go into a scene, you don't want to just read the sides and then go shoot your scene. You want to know what happened before the scene and what's going to happen after this scene. That way you can play the scene to the best of your ability. You can go, okay, I just came from a crazy fight and I ran to this location that this scene takes. I need to start this out of breath and tired and maybe a little thirsty. So it kind of gives you somewhere to go. But if you don't know that before doing that scene, you're going to show up like this and look totally normal, and the audience isn't going to buy it. They're going to be like, that's not authentic at all. So really keep it authentic and remember, where were you, where are you, and where are you going? And if you give yourself that thought process before starting an audition, you're able to really kind of sink into the character a little bit more and then do the process. And they don't mind giving you an extra 5 seconds. It's not like you're taking 10 minutes and saying, excuse me, while I go sit in the corner and practice my lines. It's very, I mean, you can do that on sets, but in the audition process, give yourself a second to let your heart stop racing and to just feel focused and involved in the character. Sometimes people work on nerves really well, but sometimes people don't. So you need to find a method that works for you to be able to calm yourself down, because whether you've been on a set before or not, sometimes there are certain scenes that will be nerve-wracking. There can be a big dramatic scene that you're worried about. There can be a big comedy scene that you're worried about. I don't know if you have any like trouble with either like drama scenes or comedy scenes? Do you ever get nervous on set still? Or?
No, I think the best thing for that is to just go over stuff a lot. You know what I mean? Like, there are many different schools of acting, but for me, it's just a matter of knowing I know all the dialogue, and if I know it all verbatim and I can practically say it backwards, then whatever happens during the scene, you can change and make adjustments to. I think it's just a matter of really knowing the material very well. That's how I am, and the times I do get nervous are when I'm standing with the script supervisor right before we shoot, working on lines, going like, "Fuck, I don't know this.
Yeah,
I gotta."
so true.
You know.
I am the queen of, if I get sides or lines, sometimes I'm just like, gosh, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Father, and like, I'm like, I wouldn't say father, I'd say dad, you know? But then I have to kind of remember that, like, this is a character I'm playing, and maybe they wanted her to say father. But then sometimes, it's just bad writing. Sometimes they don't know how to write lines. They can come up with a good story, but the lines aren't really current, if it's a current film. And I've run into this case, like, more than once, so I'll kind of change it up a little bit to give it a little bit more of that authenticity that I'm looking for. Like, a teenage girl probably wouldn't be like, "Father, where are we going now?" She'd be like, "Hey, Dad, where are we going?" You know, instead of like being so proper about it. And I'm so used to kind of having to change lines that I did I did a couple episodes of The Middle, and they're so strict about lines, and I didn't know that going in. So I'd memorized all my lines and kind of flubbed them and played with them a little bit, and I get in there and I do the scene. I do the rehearsal, and the script supervisor comes up to me, and she's a lady who really makes sure that everybody has their lines right. She goes, "Okay, I know this is really frustrating, but you have to say each word exactly as it is written." I said, "Really?" She goes, "They are sticklers about it here." And my heart sunk, because I'm so used to being able to play off of, if I forget a line, I can throw something else in there and get away with it. But it's sloppy. You don't want to get in that habit, because when that does happen and they're like, "I'm sorry, you have to do it word for word," which is smart because they had amazing writers, and the rhythm works when they had it their way instead of my way. But I was thrown off, and I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, the other thing on that I have as a rule for myself is, if I run into a situation where I feel like something is unnatural or doesn't flow right, I have to, as an actor, make it my job to figure out how to make it work. So if they've presented me with a script and I'm reading this line and I'm like, I don't know how to say that, I have to. That's my job. My job is to figure out how to say it. Maybe it's sarcastic. Maybe, there's 1,000 different ways you can say something. So in there is a way to say this line as it's written. Now, after I've spent time figuring it out and I have a version of how I can say it and I'm happy with it, if I'm still miserable, I'll then talk to a writer or the producer about, "Hey, this line, can I change the to or something, whatever." That's a small analogy, but I think, especially when you're starting out, you should not go in trying to rewrite anybody's writing. There's a reason that piece of writing is being produced, and it's your job as an actor to figure out how to make that work. And while there are many instances where the actor can improve the work, just know that there's a reason that is being produced.
Oh, yeah. So we can finish up with auditions and maybe get into some other stuff. When with auditions, sometimes you don't get a script, and they'll just give you sides, and that's all you know about the character. You read the sides and you go, "Okay, well, in this script, she is, kind of charming and quirky, so that's all I know. They didn't even give me an age, so I have no idea how old this girl is." So you just have to kind of go off of what's on there. So what I do sometimes when I don't have a script for something is I create my own story. I create the whole kind of backstory to whatever this character is. And I could be 100% wrong and completely off. But if you go in there confident, having chosen something, I feel like they'll see that and B, that was a solid performance, even though it wasn't what we were looking for, and now maybe we can work with her to get her there. But if you go in there so uneasy and like kind of throwing this character all over the place, they're gonna feel like it's just sloppy and like you didn't really work on it. I don't know if that's always
Yeah,
but
no,
I feel like going in solid and confident, even if it's 100% wrong, is better than going in having no idea what kind of character you are.
If you make a choice, you should feel good about that choice and don't waver with it and halfway through go, was that the right choice? I'm now going to do something different. Because they'll see, you can see that.
And that's inconsistent. And I think that'd be very frustrating for any director. Another thing is, after you've made a choice, you have to be ready to throw it out the window. Because that director can say, that was a great performance, but 100% not what we're looking for. I need you to try it this way. And you have to be able to change it on the spot. So don't be offended when they don't necessarily go with your idea of what you had in mind for the character. Because really, it's their story, not yours. You're just bringing it to life. And I feel like there's so many times when people are like, I worked so hard, I put so many hours into it. I'm like, but so did they. And really at the end of the day, it's not your story, it's somebody else's. So I know it's kind of maybe bad to say this, but we're kind of puppets. We're trying to create something and entertain people, but at the same time, we have to stay true to what the writers or director originally intended for the story, especially if it's like a biography on somebody. So I think that staying authentic is always key. Another thing that my mom kind of coached me until I turned 18, and then now she's working with my little sisters because she's on a show in New York. So one thing that, and you can totally tell we came from an acting family, because we would be doing something, and I don't know, we'd be at the park, and I would like fall off of the swing or something, and say like, oh my gosh, that hurt my bum so much, or whatever. Let's just say that. And she'd go, okay, remember how you said that. I was like, what? And she goes, remember how you said that, because if you ever have to do a scene, keep that in your treasure chest. So it definitely is an acting family, but it's true. Because if you're walking outside in a scene and it's cold weather and you're like, oh, it's cold, would you really do that? Like, would you walk outside and be like, oh, it's cold in a scene? I feel like with me, when I'm freezing, like everybody can tell you that I just kind of hold myself differently, but I'm not like, oh, it's cold, like, showing you. How would you react to the weather? How would you react to, somebody dumping you? How would you react to somebody saying, I love you? Keep those things in your treasure chest because you can use them in scenes. You just, I feel like you can play a character, but you want to keep it still, like, parts of you in there to keep it real. Like, you wouldn't, I don't know, even though I wouldn't say father, I would still talk to the person. If they're like, Alexa, I need you to say, I'll see you later, father, instead of dad. I would still be like, see you later, father. Like, you can't be like, I'll see you later, father, because that doesn't seem real. So try to keep it as real as possible. I don't know if I'm kind of making sense at all, but I feel like authenticity is just so key. So my mom has always told me, and I think this kind of goes against what a lot of teachers teach, so if you think it's wrong, go ahead and tell me that you think it's wrong, because I think different methods are good for different people. Anytime I'm doing a scene, and if it's just a scene with one other person, my mom always says, personalize it. And if I have to do a scene where this person's my best friend or an uncle or whatever, I will use somebody in my life that relates kind of the most to that character. So if this girl's supposed to be my best friend, I'll probably be like, oh, well, my sister Chrysia suits this character, so I'll pretend like I'm talking to Chrysia. And if you kind of pretend like you're talking to somebody you know, you'll say the lines a little different. You'll feel a little bit more comfortable, and instead of saying them like you can say it line for line, but I feel like when you're reading something, you sound very different as opposed to just saying it. So always kind of personalize it. Put a face on who you're talking to instead of just air or a casting director. Because a lot of times a casting director isn't going to read with you well. They just kind of say the lines, hoping that you'll give a good performance back. So personalize it, and then you can kind of erase their face and put somebody that you want to talk to in there.
That's not what I do, but I don't think that's wrong, and I think it's whatever works for you is good. You know, Daniel Day-Lewis lived in a wheelchair while he was making My Left Foot. I wouldn't be
I
about
had no
to do that.
idea.
Yeah. So it's whatever, you know, if whatever technique you use that works for you is right, I think.
Cool.
Let's
Oh, yes.
10 minutes and we'll have
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Great. Do you guys have any questions so far or anything about the audition process? Go ahead.
I would like to know what you would do.
What I would do?
Yes. She was saying she'd personalize it by putting something she knows there. What do you do?
I just know my lines and assume I'm communicating with the character that I'm meant to be communicating with.
What do you as actors want from your directors?
That's a good question because there are actors directors and then there are like crew directors, and it kind of sucks when you get on a film hoping to be able to get feedback from your director and you realize that he's more focused on the lamp in the background of the shot. And that will happen way more than you think. Like, it's happened on the last 3 films, and it's hard because you need feedback. You need to know if you're going in the right direction, and it shows in your performance because if you don't have a solid feedback of like, okay, is this right? Am I making the right decision? Then later on in the movie when they're cutting together the film, usually the director's like, oh man, I should have said something. So I feel like if you're not getting anything back from the director, you need to walk up to your director and ask him, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I really need to make sure that things are going well. And sometimes they'll brush it off and be like, you're doing great. And then you have to kind of stop them again and be like, I just want to make sure that everything is good. And then ask them questions that maybe you were having trouble with answering yourself. So I feel like from your director, you want them, because at the end of the day, even though that lamp in the background is important, it's not going to be as important as the face that the audience is watching. Right. Because I can't, it's so frustrating when they're worried about what's behind me instead of what I'm doing in the scene, because I'm the one who's going to look bad later on if it doesn't go well. And if it's inconsistent, which is still my job to make it consistent, whether the director's present or not, it's my job to make sure I have a solid, consistent performance. But sometimes you need guidance, and if you don't have that, oh my gosh, it's the worst. And you can sit there and blame the editors and blame the director, but still you're the one that looks like crap on camera. I don't know if you feel the same way, but...
Yeah, I think that it comes down to whose hat is what, but if a director just knows what they want to get and they're getting it, then I'm happy with them. If a director, you know, decides halfway through a shoot that the movie should be going in a different direction, then that's not fun. So I think you just need to have an idea of what you want to get and try to stick to that, despite, you know, lamps in the background or, you know, picky actors or, you know, cameras fucking up or, you know, a set doesn't come together the way you picture it and make it work in your idea of what you want to get. That's, as long as that's happening, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Any other questions? None for audition or acting so far? Okay. We'll go to the next thing. I'm trying to think of what else I have.
This is a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Like, how would you find a good agent?
Well, I mean, there are going to be all sorts of agents, and I feel...
What is the industry like here? Do you live here?
Yeah, like, well, I live like in Seminole.
Is that near here?
Yeah.
So, what do you know if there are things being produced here?
I'm not sure. Like, I tried to find out, but
Do you know? Do you wait?
Basically what they do is they're doing the uplinks, and they're going into like Louisiana, Georgia, Miami, and you film it here, you do it on tape, send it there, email it, and then the callbacks, you can do the traveling callbacks.
So it's still a process to where you have to go somewhere else. That's what it sounds like.
There's not filming here and
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm from Florida, and my mom was a model here, but I didn't start acting here. I had to go to California and get an audition there
And
to
all
start
the
acting.
major roles, all the, principal roles are being cast out of LA
LA or New York.
or New York.
Yeah, in LA, there are books that list agents and agencies and their addresses, and you can send them letters or, call them and ask to meet with them. I don't know how you would get an agent here. I mean, you could probably,
Well, we have-
send a letter from here to Los Angeles, but you'd still
Here in
have to.
Tampa, there's only 2 casting directors. One is a PO box, and one is an acting teacher.
Wow.
She does the Eric Morris stuff.
Well, I feel like with agents and managers, and I don't know. I have a couple people, friends who started and kind of got ripped off right away, and I feel like as far as there's some agents that charge you a fee, I guess I've heard
No,
to
that's
join
not.
their agency.
Well, if they
No,
are
there are some
charging you a
people.
fee,
Don't listen
sign
to
up
them.
with them.
Yeah,
No
no.
reputable agent's gonna charge you a fee.
No, and then there are also kind of teams of agents and managers who will both charge 15% of whatever you're making. So that's already 30% out of your paycheck gone.
If you're non-union, and that's the perk for going out of LA, they get 20%.
What?
They get 20%.
You ever heard that?
Whoa.
I've never heard. Well, I'll personally tell you, I'm 10% for my agent and 10% for my manager. Always have been, and that's what I always will be. And I'm glad to give them that because they work hard for me. But I feel like any more than that, and you're giving like way too much out of your paycheck. Like, I have my whole family. We have to take care of each other. That's like a lot of money already gone. And you always hear these stories about people going bankrupt. I mean, but if you make, $100, 30% of your money, if you're doing 15-15, is already gone. And then if you have a business manager, then that is an extra like 5%. And if you have your attorney, which is another 5%, how much money are you making at the end of the day? And then
you've got
half
the
of it with
IRS.
taxes. Yes. So really, people are like, well, how'd they go broke? Well, they're not making $1 million a movie. They're actually making like $250,000, which is still big. But when they have these rich, luscious lifestyles, it goes away quickly. So save up.
2 things. There's Hines Casting, Heather Hines out of Orlando, and I think 2 days ago there was extra roles for like anyone that she could find in Jacksonville, which is a drive, it's a hike, but there's a lot of stuff out of Orlando. Heather Hines and Hines Casting is a good resource.
You guys hear all that? Write it down.
The frustrating thing for me is when you go on the search for the the right photographer. You got headshots, you put a nice comp card together, and pull up your resume, you find an agent, you get signed with a good agency, and you said you did commercials and film stuff at the same time. Did you feel it was hard or frustrating? Because I do, when you're thrown for an audition, and then you have like a go-see after it, and then the next day it's for like a commercial print ad?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely can be a little frustrating because you will go on 100 auditions before you get one. I mean, and some people go years. They'll go 3 or 4 years and never land an audition, and suddenly, on that 5th year, they land the lead in a huge movie. It happens. I mean, I know that's a rare thing, but it happens. But you have to be willing. If this is something you want to do, you have to be patient because you got to think, okay, I want to be an actor or a model, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Well, there's a girl that looks exactly like you, who probably is the same height, she's as good as you, maybe she's even better, who will get that role instead. And there are like 300 of the other girls that are my age trying to do the same thing. And it's just something that one of these days, if you just stick with it, you'll land something. And with every audition you go into, you learn something new. And it's practice. It's kind of trial and error a little bit. Every audition you go into is a class. And I've never gone to acting class. Have you done acting class?
Yeah, I did 16 to 17.
Did you like them?
No.
Acting classes might be good for some people. For me, I've never gone. I kind of always felt like it was like a social group instead of an acting class. I felt like it was like a way to hang out with other people who might be in the business. And I wasn't really into that. I was really focused on trying to just be better. And one thing I found that I do like are one-on-one sessions sometimes when I'm confused about a role, I'm just like, you know, I don't feel like I can make this solid by myself, and I don't have access to a director, and I really want to get this audition. So there's a guy I work with in California. You know Howard Fine?
Yeah.
Howard Fine has been wonderful. I've only worked with him 3 times, but he is amazing. He's really amazing. And it's kind of weird how, like, he says the same thing I do. He's like, okay, where are you coming from? Where are you now? Where are you going? And even though he's saying the same thing, it's just something about being able to read with somebody who's really good and knows really the breakdown of what acting